Hello, everybody. Okay, I just want to verify that the audio is working. Hello, everybody in chat. Oh, look at all these lovely people. I love it. Awesome. We got 15 concurrent viewers. Sweet. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this stream. Let's just first verify that audio is working and that there's not too much feedback. Give that a moment. I'm really excited to show you guys a little bit about scale today. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let me know if you're getting audio. Audio is working. Awesome. Thank you, Philip. So for those of you who don't know, today we're going to be understanding scale. And I'm really excited to explain that to you, especially in tools. Also, hello, welcome. Hello, yeah, awesome. Thank you, Joy. Great, awesome. Go ahead and make sure to clone and edit this map. I put it in it's in the description below, or you can find it in the chat. Basically, we're going to be going over various types of maps and how to apply scale to those. As you can see on the screen, we're going to be going over world maps, regional maps, and there's all kinds, and then battle maps. So we'll be going over how to apply scale to those three types of maps. And just as kind of like a caveat, just to let you know, this isn't the only way to go about it. As a DM, if you're running a campaign, you have a lot of options when it comes to scale and how to go about it. And there's a lot of different styles concerning scale. So it's going to be kind of exciting to go over all those variations. So make sure that you, again, clone, edit the map if you want to follow along. Let's go ahead and get started. So first, let's just define what we mean by scale. In scale, it means the distance between 2 points on a map. That includes one shoreline to the other, one point of interest to another, a forest to a point of interest. All those define scale, okay? So it's distance between 2 points, but it's also how big your stamps are going to be on a map. And so that's the other part of scale. So we'll cover both of those points because scale can be kind of confusing. Okay, not going to talk too much. It's all right if you don't say much. Zedekiah King, it's all right. So let's go ahead and get started. Hopefully you people, you lovely users have uploaded this or cloned this and are at it. So the first map we're going to talk about is a very large scale, and that's world maps. And normally when I make my world map, I generally make my landscape first, my land shapes, and then I go ahead and start making a scale right away. I make a scale, and the reason why I make a scale is so that I already know what the distances are on how big the landmass is. So I've made this scale, and I'll show you how to make a scale as well. There are options. This is a group, and it should be properly named as well. It should be called scale, and it's a group. You can just rename the group or edit it, lock it, open it up, and see how you made it. And so having a scale immediately right away, especially on a world map, allows you to start placing things on it. And what I do is I like to do this. I like to take the scale and say, okay, what are the distances between these two shorelines? We're looking at about 900 miles, you know. So, and if I want to check how long this one is, I could say this looks like, in width, it's about, goes to 0 to roughly about 500 or so. So this is what I do right away. You make this scale, add your increments, and just, you know, there is no right or wrong about the increments that you want to use. I know that numbers can be kind of intimidating and it seems like, oh, it's kind of scary. It's not as scary as you think. It's just a little bit of math. And yes, math is scary and complex. You know, there's a variety of people who find math to be intimidating. They hate it. There are those who love math and it makes perfect sense to them. God, I wish, I wish I was one of those people. I am not one of those math people. I am way better with visuals and graphics and the art than I am with the math part. But hopefully showing you in this video, scale will be a little bit easier. Scale is the object's proportion of tiny things, so scale has to be adjusted. Yeah, absolutely. So with a world map, you're always thinking with a larger scale. So for me, for this one, I chose the individual increments to mean 150 miles, or if you're in Europe, then it's going to be the metric system. Since the majority of our users are in the United States, we're going to use imperial, and it's okay if you want to switch over, use metric, it's fine. So just for this map, I chose 150 mile increments. You can go with other increments, 60 miles, 75, whatever. It's entirely up to you. That's how you want to decide. Okay, so again, create your scale first. That's the first thing that you want to do outside of making the landmass, is create a scale and then use it as a guide to decide how you want things apart. Because I get a lot of questions about how do I make it 60 miles between or 100 miles between this POI and that POI. So let's go ahead and do that right away. Let's jump right in. I'm going to go to that catalog. You just press the O key, F key to go into the catalog part. And I'm going to choose Fantasy World because that's the style that this first one is in. And I'm going to just go ahead and put down some mountains. So this is the second part of scale. The second part of scale is how big is a mountain in relation to a tree. The first thing you got to know about maps is that they are representations of reality and don't have to be exact duplicates of reality. And by that I mean, if you look at a mountain and then you put a tree next to it, you'll notice that at this scale, both at 100, the tree, obviously a mountain is so much more massive that you would not see an individual tree at all. So you're making a representation of a forest. You want it to be visible, right? So you obviously wouldn't make the forest this small. You'd make the tree a little bit bigger. Is this out of proportion to the mountain? Yes, of course. Of course it is. But you also want to see your forests. You want to see your POIs, okay? So this is a matter of personal preference. For me, whenever I'm scaling up any map, whenever I'm scaling or deciding the proportions for any map, I place a mountain first. And the reason why is because the mountain is going to be the largest thing that you're going to see on a world map, right? It's huge. Mountains are massive, okay? So this is going to be basically your anchor stamp that you're going to use to relate the proportions of all other stamps. That's always important. So this is that proportion part. We're not worried about scale and distance between 2 points. We're worried about proportion. Obviously, this mountain is massive. If we put it on the scale, it's like 450, 525 miles wide. That's huge, and I'm not even going to worry about that, but I do want to bring it down because when you look at the landmass, look how large this mountain is. That's not going to work, right? So you want to create a mountain that's going to be small enough to where there's room on the rest of the landmass for players to run around, for you to do your time skip travel, or if it's going to be a hex grid, it's up to you how you want to go about traveling. That's up to your DM. Honestly, when it comes to world maps, time skip, I prefer that over hex crawls or using a grid. It is entirely up to you as a DM. You have lots and lots of options. So let's bring the mountain size down to where we want it. I'm going to go to about 40. That's the size I want. And then I'm going to go ahead and make a mountain range real quick. And we'll just put a mountain range along this ledge here. So this is that proportion part. So once you've added that mountain range, now you have something to use as a guide to decide what's going to be best. What's going to be best for putting down your points of interest or your trees and everything else like that. So we already did the mountain part. And so now we can put in trees. I'm going to keep it to scale. So just my personal preference, I like my trees to be a little bit more visible so that people can see them. So let's go ahead and apply the tree in here like this. All right. And normally with mountains, there's a lot of forests at the base of the mountains. It's not always the case, but that's what I like to do. So now we have a scale, we have some guide here. We have trees and we have mountains, and then we can decide on the POI kind, the kind of POIs that we want. Now, because maps are representations, there are a couple routes that you can go with your POIs, okay? That is, you can go with a highly stylized, out of scale, big POI, and it's just stylized. You're not worried about whether it's going to be to scale to the mountains or not, okay? Now, if you do want your towns and POIs to be a little bit closer to the scale of your current stamps, that's the mountains and the trees that we have, then you can use just simple POI icons from the world style like this, and I'm gonna show them to you. Let me get them real quick. There's also some in parchment. It's up to you. But you can use these very simple icons, just scale them down. And then this way you don't have to worry about whether or not they're to scale with the trees and the mountains. If you just don't want a representation like a small little scene, you just want to use an icon. And I know that is a personal preference for some people, because I know that when it comes to scale, there is a spectrum of people. There's ones who say, I want the most realistic that I can get it, and that's perfectly okay. And there are those who want to stylize their POIs by putting, you know, a little icon in there that has maybe like a village, or let me check real quick and I'll show you what I mean. Let's say you want to put down this thing right here, okay? Now this thing is huge compared to your mountains, but you're not focused on whether or not it's to scale. You're focused on what it looks like so that players know what they might be walking into when they go to this location. Okay, yes, and I will mention grid as well. For now, we're gonna just use scale. So let's go ahead and do what we just talked about. Let me add a few locations on the map and decide how I want the scale to work. So let me go back. Let's put in another location, maybe right here. Okay, and let's say that you want these locations to be 100 miles apart from each other, right? Or whatever the increment might be. So you take your scale. I'm gonna go ahead and put on the highest layer and just go like this up to it and just decide what on the distance. So right here currently between this POI and this POI, it's well over 300, it's about 300 miles or so. So that's how I go about deciding if I want the players to say, oh, well, or if there's time skip travel, it's going to be 300 plus miles and it's going to take this number of days, depending whether your players are on foot, or whether they're on horse, or they're traveling by river and a boat. So it's up to you on how you want to go about that. But this is how I go about making sure that there are accurate increments, the proper metric or distance between my POIs if you're super focused on that, okay? So if you are focused on distances between POIs, create a scale like I just made here, and then just move it around up against it, okay? And if you're not satisfied with the scale, you can also just make the scale smaller, right? By just making it bigger or smaller, okay? So those options. I'm going to keep it back. So this is how you do basically understanding distances between two distances. And a scale is not the only way. Obviously, you can apply a grid if you wish. So going over to the grid tool and just show that grid. I always put my grid on layer -5. So let me make sure that it's set there, layer -5, because I don't want it to overlap my stamps. So I'm putting it underneath. It's okay. Don't worry about it, Deadish. This is recorded. You can always go back. You can just go back a little bit and just go over it. Okay, and this stream's going to be a little bit shorter. Thank goodness I've already done this setup. So today's stream will probably only be about an hour or so. So the next step is also knowing travel outside of the scale, the distance between the two things. You can use the grid. Okay, and you can set what you want the grid to be at. All right, so just know that the smaller the numbers, the larger the grid is going to get. If I go up in numbers, that means I'm having more and more grids, more and more squares in the grid. Okay, so going up and down, this is how you decide how big your grid squares are going to be. And for me, what I like to do is I like to sometimes have my POIs be specifically within a grid if you're going to go with a grid style like this. And this way you can understand like the distances between the grid and you can decide how many square miles or kilometer each grid is. So if we wanted to go with the original assessment of 150 miles, then you could say the same thing, that these grids equal a distance of 150 miles each, square miles. So if I was to put these next to each other, this is about 300 miles right here, these two squares. Okay, so this is about 150 miles apart from each other, 300 miles apart from each other, 450 miles apart from each other. Okay, and just that's how you do the math. Whatever increment you decide in the first part, this first section, all you're going to do is just double it up and then add another 150 and then add another 150 and add another 150. The way that you do the small increments in between, those are 75. Those are 75 because half of 150 is 75. So 75 plus 150 equals 225. So that's how you work that. Okay, so just whatever your starting increment is, all you have to do is just keep adding those increments and then cut that increment in half to do the half points. So 225, 375, 525, 675, 900. Okay, and it really depends on also in the end, when you finish it, your scales don't have to be this detailed. You can just include a 0, 150, 450, and then maybe 900 at the end. Okay, it depends on the style that you're going for. Okay, so let's go back real quick to scale, what's called your want to say I lost myself. Your proportion. Okay, let's go back to proportions. So it's up to you what you want to decide, just to review what we just talked about. It's up to you on what kind of POIs that you want to use, whether it's just a single dot, and that's closer to the scale, because obviously if you're trying to go to closer to realism, you're never going to see the POI. It's going to be so small that you wouldn't see it. So go with those small, little tiny POIs instead, and make them big enough to where your players can see them. Okay, so this is how I generally approach world maps, is one, scale, distance between 2 points, or if you're going to go with a grid because you want to have movement on your grid with your players, then make sure that you set the increment for what each grid size is. 150 in this case, but for you, you can do whatever you want. 60 square miles, 90 square miles. This is all relative. It's entirely up to you how you want to go about it. Obviously, when it comes to VTT and printing, things are a little bit different, especially with the printing, because these calculations have to be translated over to inches or the metric, whatever it is that you're using, okay? I'm not going to focus on VTT or printing right now. I'm only going to focus on just the scale in tool, and maybe in another video we can go over the VTT and printing type setups. I'm not going to worry about that here. Okay. If there's any questions about world maps, you want me to continue on with more of the demo with world, please ask those questions in the chat and we'll quickly address those. If those don't get asked within the next couple of minutes, then I'll switch over to regional maps and how I go about doing regional maps. Okay, so please ask any questions in the chat. We'll go over that. I hope that I explained that well. If it's confusing, please let me know. I want to make sure that I clarify all this stuff so it's not complex, because scale doesn't have to be complicated. It really doesn't. It's really just understanding some very basic math and then putting together your scale and then understanding how to deal with proportion. And proportion, just to recap, is all about placing your first stamp, which on a world map, again, is going to be your mountains. That's going to be your base stamp that all other stamps are going to be scaled to, okay? Since there's no questions for world maps, I'll go ahead and move on to regional maps and how I go about that. Now, there's a lot of ways that you can approach regional maps. There's hex crawls. It's a little old school. I know that there's in the 5e guidebook, there's like a whole bunch of stuff that talk about that. Let me see if I can remember what that is. Let me check. I do believe that in 5e 5th edition, there are suggestions for a province equals 1 mile per hex. I think kingdom is like 6 miles, and I think it's like 6 or 60 miles, I think, for a continent. But you don't have to follow those rules if you don't want to. Oh, Savina Shield. Yeah, have a question? Please ask. Let's do that. Feel free to ask your question and we'll answer that. Okay, and I'm going to just turn off the grid for now or switch over to a different grid while questions get asked. Excellent. I'll wait for that question. I'm going to quickly just describe a little bit about the regional while Savina adds their question to the chat. So, oh, wait, here we go. Hold up, there's some chat delay. Yes, there is some chat delay. I'll slow down then. Sorry about that. I think there's a 60-second delay. I will wait. Apologies for that. I'm going to quickly save while that's happening. How do you place volcanoes and scale them properly? It's generally the same as your mountains. Okay, so technically a volcano is an unstable mountain. Hot magma comes up through cracks in the surface of the planet, and those are like thermal vents. As you have something called conduction, I can't remember the name of it, but there's a term for it, where plates go overlap each other, and then that crust becomes weak, and then hot magma spews up. Okay, and generally, when I scale a volcano, I do it the same as I do mountains. So let's just add a volcano, and I like to put mountains inside, or volcanoes inside of a mountain range, because volcanoes can be responsible for some formations. So let's say that I want to remove this mountain right here, and I want to put a volcano right there. So I'll switch over to the catalog, O key, F key. I'm going to type in volcano, We'll just put in vol. Oopsie, because there's a C there, my mistake. Let's say that we want to use this volcano, okay? And you generally just want to keep it to the scale of your mountains. That's really what I do. I always keep it to the scale of my mountains. Let me make sure that I have it on the right layer. I want to make sure I fit it in here. Now, wait a minute. Why are these? Something's not working here. Okay, we'll go back. So we'll put the volcano. Let's say let's put it up right here. Sorry about that. You want to put a volcano right here or in this corner right here. I would generally scale it to about the same size, about relatively the same size as a mountain, really. Yeah, absolutely. So, and just this isn't really scale related, but something similar to it. Make sure that you add in just some small mountains around it. Okay. I just watched a really interesting volcanology tutorial last night, so that's super cool that someone mentioned a volcano in the chat. That's cool. Awesome. I get to apply a little bit of what I know about it. Please, Savina, let me know if this answered your question. If you still have more questions about the volcano, if you feel like, no, scaling to around the same size of the mountain isn't good enough, let me know and we can try to figure it out together, as well as with Philip. And anyone in chat, if you're aware of this information, feel free to share it. I'm open to all things. I'm not a master at this kind of stuff, so please correct me if I've made some false information. I don't mind being corrected. All right, my ego's not that big, just slightly big. So Savina, get back to me. Let me know if this answered your question. If not, clarify a little bit more, and maybe we can go into depth over that, and I will wait. I'll just go ahead and add some stuff to the map while Savina figures that out. So I'm just going to put in some mountain ranges here and wait for some questions to get filled in here, because I was moving a little too quickly, it sounds like. Naughty me. Naughty, naughty. How dare I? Okay, I'm just going to put in some hills just for fun, and I'm going to wait for Savina to get back to us. You can generally find a lot of foothills at the base of mountains, as you would kind of expect. Okay, that's good. Just waiting on Savina. Okay, I'm just going to throw in some stuff. They're going for scale. Okay, yeah. Yeah, volcanoes are like some of my favorite POIs on a map. I absolutely love them. Okay, well, I'm not getting a response yet about the scale. I'll just wait a couple more seconds to make sure I'm not jumping the gun here. Yeah, and this, just so you know, it's the same thing with karsts, with mesas, all those things, okay? So if you're going to place a mesa, a karst, or those other large rock formations, you can scale them relatively close to the mountains. I would expect a mesa to probably be slightly smaller than a mountain, but I mean, it just depends. Geography is very complex and diverse, and there's a lot going on. If you need help, then I definitely recommend going over the Explore page and looking over maps of users that you really like. You like the style, you like their scale. Hopefully they're clonable and you can go over them and be like, oh yeah, I love this. That always helps if you clone and edit and look over users' maps that you really like their scale. Go check it out and see what they do. Because scale is all really a matter of preference, because you can make the mountains huge. You've seen RPG video game maps. Sometimes they have huge mountain ranges that are just totally out of proportion with the rest of the stamps, and that's entirely up to you. So remember, it's all a matter of personal preference. Me personally, I like a little bit of stylized. I don't like to make everything so tiny, because I want my viewers, the people that look at the map, to really use them. Okay, if you use the path tool to draw roads, would you recommend drawing it to match your scale, or is that going overboard? Eric, no, I don't think that's going overboard. I mean, there are various ways to go about doing distances with travel. So let's put down a couple things on the map and go over it. So what you're asking is if we have two locations on the map, and then we go ahead and take the path tool, and then we just place it down. Let's go ahead and quickly make a path and have it go from like here to here. Okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to look at this. It does help a little, though. I have Been studying volcanology and volcanic eruptions for 3 years now. It does help a little. Okay. Well, I'm sorry, Savina, that I couldn't have been of more help. From what I understand about scale, it's relatively around the same as your mountains. You don't have to. It's nothing extra special or anything like that. I mean, if you want to be accurate about whether or not a volcano is on a fault line or not, yeah, absolutely. And that's where you find a lot of volcanoes and stuff like that, is on fault lines and stuff. So, I mean, you could look at the San Andreas fault line. You can look at the fault lines that are over in Hawaii, where there's a ton of there's a couple underground volcanoes and still very active volcanoes on this one of the larger islands, I think. That's unfortunate. Well, maybe I'll have to dedicate a guide to showing a little bit about volcanology and how to implement it into your maps. Because, and again, that's purely a matter of personal preference, whether or not you want it to be realistic with the volcanoes on a fault line and they're scaled properly with the proper arrangement. That's all up to you. It's personal preference. I will dedicate some time to look over volcanology and to try to apply it more if your preference is more realism. So let me know, Savina, if that's something that would interest you, and let me know also if realism is your personal preference, and then maybe we can look into some kind of guide or tutorial that will help with realism. And I'm going to go back to Eric Christ's question. Sorry if I pronounced that last name wrong, Eric. So let's say that you were saying that there is distance between these two locations. So let's take the scale, and you're saying, would these two locations be like travel time? Is kind of looking around. This looks roughly around 370 miles away from each other. And you're asking, how do you portray that in travel? Eric, is that what you're asking? I'm going to go back over the question just to make sure to verify that I understood it. Okay, yes, you could match it to scale if you wanted to. Sometimes what I do, and this is just a DM guide for myself, is what I'll often do is add in like the day length. So if this is 350 miles, you could say that this is like a 5-day travel. And this is not accurate, you could change it. But often what I do is I'll create little things on the map to help me. So you could say that this path is a 5-day travel, and it depends on how you want to do your travel as well, whether you want to do time skip or whether or not you want to have like a regional map that actually takes your characters through each section. Me personally, as a DM, time skip is the best way for me to go about traveling. And the reason why is because then you have to make more maps. And you as a DM, you might not have time to make every single regional map, hex crawl, battle map, whatever that you need. So do less work for yourself and try adding in time skip for most of your traveling on world maps. And that's my personal preference. If there's like a region that you want to travel on foot, horse, or by boat, then create a regional map and then pick the grid increments and the scale that you want to use. That's how I've gone about it. I personally just find it less work to do time skip for almost everything. Generally, at least for world maps and even in regional maps, because I don't want to make 50 maps for a campaign or a module that I'm working on. Right now, I'm currently working on a module, and I made the mistake of kind of going with making all these regional maps that you could travel on. And I was like, oh, what the fart did I do that for? Like, there's all this time skip that I could do. So this is one way to go about it. Is just say 5-day travel for this and then increment that and put that in. Okay, I'm going to quickly read. Thank you. It is much interest. I'm mostly interested in proper scale and proportion in relation to the surrounding landscape. It doesn't have to be IRL realistic maps. Of course, absolutely. I would just use, if you wanted to go super realistic, I would just go with satellite images instead. But, you know, obviously we're a map making tool. We encourage you to make maps. So yeah, I will probably take some time to dedicate some time to make a guide on more realism. And I'll probably have to coordinate with Philip, because Philip is really good at scale on maps like these. So Philip is kind of the master. Perfect. Just wanted some insight. Yeah, awesome. I hope that helps. It's just as a general rule of thumb, always give yourself less work as a DM. okay, always, because the more work you give yourself, the more time it's going to take, and the more frustrated you're going to get, and the more you're going to want to give up. So give yourself less work. Do time skip. Do time skip. Okay, now if there's no more questions about this world map, we'll go ahead and move on to the next one. Hello, Adrian. Welcome. If there's no more questions, I'll go ahead and save this. Volcanoes are awesome, Sabina, by the way. I definitely will try to make maybe a little tiny image guide first. Just try to break down the simplistic explanation of plate tectonics and where to put your volcano and how to scale them properly. Again, just for those who missed it, your mountain, you're generally going to scale your volcanoes relatively to mountains. Okay, about the same. This is not like an absolute, it's just a general rule of thumb, okay? All right, if there's no more questions, I'll wait a couple seconds and we'll move on to regional maps. I think everyone got the general gist of that. So I'll just quickly review this last one. Sorry for being repetitive. World maps, large scale. Okay, world maps are large scale. That means many, many miles, many, many kilometers. Our planet itself has about 26,000 plus miles in circumference. Okay, just to put it into perspective, just how big your scale on a world map is going to be. 26.8K miles. I don't know what the translation to kilometers is. If there's someone in here who uses metric, feel free to translate that, but 26,000 miles, almost 27,000 miles is huge. So you get a general idea that your world maps are going to be on a much larger scale. Again, the increment that you decide to use is entirely up to you. I went with 150. Definitely create your scale first so that way you know how much distance you have between your shorelines, between your mountain ranges. All those things are going to be helpful to keep things relatively within the right travel distances and all that kind of stuff. Okay, it doesn't look like there's any questions, so we'll move on to regional. Okay, so as I was saying before, with regional maps, there are multiple ways to go about your regional traveling. If you want to do time skip, you absolutely can. Now, if you want your characters in your campaign to be more exploring, look for side quests, go adventuring around, looking at the biomes and things like that, then I absolutely, 40,000 kilometers, by the way, is what it is in the metric system from imperial to metric. That is huge. So you can see there's a giant scale when it comes to world maps. But with regional maps, there are multiple ways that you want to go about scale, and that means both distance between locations and also the size of your stamps. Again, that's going to be, you're comparing them, okay? So let me quickly go over again what was mentioned in 5e, and you don't have to follow 5e rules. You can actually do whatever you want, but just to remember the reference, it's about, if it's a province, about 1 mile per hex. With kingdom, it's about 6 miles per hex, and with a continent, it's about 60 miles per hex. Now, 60 miles per hex is huge. That's a lot of traveling and a lot of time. So I don't recommend going with your 60 mile, especially for a regional map, because that's just so much more time, so much more traveling, and so much more to explore, and so much more content that you have to add to your map. I recommend going with a smaller one, and hex maps are kind of outdated. You don't have to go with a hex map if you don't want to, but for some of you old school folks who do like hex or using hex, I generally like to go with about 6 miles per hex. That's a lot of travel, especially on foot. That's a lot of material and content you're going to put into each hex. Okay, and you don't have to use hex. I'm just using hex because hex has multiple directions, and it's easier to do traveling on a hex in compared to, let's say, using a regular square grid. If you use a square grid, you'll notice that you only have a very limited amount of direction, just the north, east, south, and west. There are no diagonal traveling. So I prefer hex. If I'm going to do a hex map, or if I'm going to do a regional map with traveling, then I prefer hex. Just a personal choice. It is a big mother we are all living on. Yes, it is huge. Our planet is tiny in comparison to other planets. I'm sure if you've seen diagrams, the Earth is actually really, 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 really small. But we're not going into cosmology maps. Hold on a second. Skunky request. How did hex maps get outdated? I thought they were just a different style. Shunky, yeah, you're right. That's not an entirely accurate statement. I've talked with some DMs and they've told me they feel it's outdated. I don't know if that's accurate or not. When it comes to hex maps, it really is a matter of personal preference. I disagree with what that friend or that person who said that they're outdated. Honestly, I think hex maps are extremely useful, and it is a matter of personal preference. So for me, hex maps are an exploratory style of map, okay? And so let's just go ahead and set what the scale we want it to be. Let's go back to grid, set it to hex, and I set it to grid set 20. So I go with 20, and so the grid is all the right size. We're going to zoom in and we're going to side and increment. So we looked at a couple. We could go, let's say that it's 6 miles. So 6M. Oopsie, it didn't work. Let me go back, type in 6M. Let's just say that these are 6 miles. Okay, that's what these are at. So 6M each. So each one of these things that you're exploring is 6 miles. And I've made a couple things just for fun. This is a swamp stuff. You'll see right here that I've went ahead and saved these. So you have grassland here, you have pine forest here, and you have swamp here. And the way that I go about my hex maps is I'm not worried so much about whether my forests, like these trees, let's say that 6 miles, these trees are huge, obviously. They're massive, but it's just a representation of a biome on a hex, okay? You can, if you want, be more realistic and just scale them down quite a bit, but you're gonna see a heck of a lot less, and it's gonna be a little harder to tell what this biome is. So I scale up just because I prefer it to be stylized, and I want my players to see what they're walking into, and it doesn't have to be to scale in that way, at least proportionately. It doesn't have to. Once you add in mountains, you can consider whether or not you want to change the scale a little bit. But me personally, I like to have my hex biomes a little bit larger and have a little bit more detail in them so players know what they're walking into in each hex. I'm going to quickly look at this real question. Most RPG players and board game players I run prefer hex over square. Absolutely. I agree. Most board games that I play, even video games, use a hex grid. It's always much preferred over square. Savina, I'm new to being a D&D GM, and I think that hex maps are the best to use for region and world. Yeah, absolutely. And that's all personal preference. You can set hex to this world map. For me personally, I would go with much smaller hexes for world traveling because there's so much more to it. That's just my personal preference. Like for here, I would have a hex be like 60 miles because the D&D does recommend 60 miles per hex. And you're just exploring a lot more. I don't include a scale personally when I do a grid. I don't use both. I don't say I'm having a scale and a grid. Choose one over the other. Either have your scale or have your grid. That's just my personal preference because you're going to have conflicting data, conflicting metrics, because you'll have a scale that may not be to scale to the actual grid sizes. As you can see here, look at this. Obviously, if I was making this 60 miles per square or per grid, that wouldn't work because it's saying it's 150 miles. So pick one or the other or conform your scale to fit to the grid. It's entirely up to you how you want to go about that. Again, scale is all a matter of personal preference and what you want until you actually get to printing and VTT. And that's a whole different ballpark. I'm not going to go into that. Again, like I said, I'm not going to worry about that. So let's just put the hex grid back to 20. Okay, so that's how I generally work out my VORNGO. I don't think I'm familiar with what that is. If someone wants to clarify that for me. So this is generally how I go about my regional hex maps. Is I generally just create a bunch of biomes within a hex. I group them together and I'll just place them everywhere. So if I want, I just go copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste. So this is like a rather large forest. Okay, so you're looking at a really, really big forest. This is gonna, well, not really, really big. If it's 6 miles, this is, let's see here, 6 times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's gonna be about 20, I think it's about 20 odd square miles. I've got to recalculate the math. If someone else here knows it, let me know. But this is how I would go about doing hex maps or just create a whole forest within the hex. So if I have if I have a forest and I want to put it in, then you just fill in the whole hex like this. It's up to you. Me personally, copy and paste is just a fast way to fill in the hexes. Just make each biome first, group it, always rename your groups. Oh, a troll in the chat. Oh, gotcha. Well, that person might have to be removed. Philip, if you see any trouble, let me know. You should have access to booting and kicking and other stuff like that. If you don't, let me know. But here is the other way you can go about it. Just fill in the entire hex with a forest or mountains. It depends on how you want to go about it. Again, it just depends on the scale, how much distance you want your players to travel, the various biomes they want to explore. It's all a matter of personal preference. Seriously, it's a lot. Hello, and thank you for doing these streams. I'm always learning a new way to use the tool. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Okay, let me just save, and I want anyone, if they have any questions more about the regional, I kind of hope I explained it. There is no general rule of thumb outside of D&D 5e, which gives you direct measurements that you want to work with, but you don't have to follow those. That's the beauty of being a DM, is it's really all up to you. And remember that scale will determine how much work you're going to do, okay? So if you're going to have something on grand scale, know that you're going to have more locations, more maps to make, more to work with. So you as a DM, you want to make a smaller module that's maybe 5e levels 1 through 4, then maybe you're going to want to drop your scale down. So it's really up to you, but more scale generally means a little bit more work, okay? And a little bit more sessions. Like, how many sessions do you want? Do you want it to be 50 sessions? Do you want it to be 6 sessions? That's all up to you. That's a matter of personal preference, okay? Again, if you have any questions on regional, let me know. Hopefully I didn't skip anything. If you have questions, feel free to ask them. If there are no questions, we'll move on to Battlemaps, and we'll go through the metrics of how I go about Battlemaps and what the standard grid is for Battlemaps. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and change up the grid settings to what I want them to be real quick. And a square, they should be right. Not seeing any questions quite yet, but we're getting there. So I'll just wait a couple seconds, and then we're going to go over battle map scale, and then hopefully we'll be done. This will be a nice short stream. It won't be super long. And I think in the future I'm going to be clipping out some of these. So maybe because some people have mentioned in comments that these videos are super ridiculously long, and sometimes it's very difficult to watch the whole thing. So I'll try to do snippets of these clips, like maybe a small clip for the world maps, a small clip for the regional maps, and a small clip for battle maps. Okay. Ooh, did I miss a question? 2 comments above. Skunky asked a question. You sadly skipped it. Oh, well, that's naughty. How did hex maps get outdated? Oh, I think I actually asked that question. Oh, no, wait. For grid style itself, opacity, color, what do you think is best? Oh, thank you for pointing that out. I appreciate it. I'm sorry that I missed that question. So when it comes to like the grid, it depends on the map that you're making and what you want the players to see, and it depends on the contrasts of your map. So great example. Let me just show you what I mean. So let's say that we're working on a map and the ground is really dark, right? Like this, okay? You're obviously going to notice that the grid is a little bit harder to see, right? You'll notice that it's the only reason why I can kind of see it is because there's a shadow on it, right? You zoom in, you can kind of see it, right? Okay, so what I would do personally is, depending on what the overall color palette and contrast of the map is, should decide what kind of grid settings you're going to use. So at a distance, it's super hard to see this. So what we can do is turn off the shadow altogether. So there's no shadow whatsoever, and you'll notice that the shadow is gone. And maybe we want to switch over to the grid being white. Now it's going to pop out a lot. So what we're going to do is just drop the opacity down quite a bit, okay? And by doing that, it's this white against this dark texture makes those squares pop out more, and therefore more visible and easier to see. So really your grid settings are going to determine on the just general brightness and lightness of a map, okay? So that's really up to you. I hope that explained it. If there are more specific questions, Skunky, that you have, please let me know and we'll go over that. I hope that it kind of explains it. Grid settings really just have to do with the overall composition of your map and how visible you want the grid to be, and if the players can see it really well, if it should be light or dark because of the textures being light or dark. That's generally how I go about changing my grid settings, okay? I hope that answered it. Let me know. There seems to be a lot more questions, so we'll go over this. Joy Baker, I don't have scale issues in regional. It's perspective that kills me. So let's quickly just go over that comment real quick. Maybe we should go over a perspective tutorial in the future. You might want to clarify a little bit more in the chat what you mean by that, because the stamps already have a forced built-in perspective. So unless you're trying to force a different perspective from what the stamps are at, I don't really understand that question. So we'll go over that later. Let's go to the next question. I'm currently working on a West Marches campaign where each hex will need a bunch of bullet point info about what is in the hex so that multiple DMs can be consistent about the world exploration. That's not a question, but that's good information. And I do put in a lot of DM information into the maps. Like if I'm making a module, I put in a lot of DM information that can be deleted from the map so the DM has them. I'm toying with accomplishing this by importing the regional map from Inkarnate into World Anvil and adding the metadata there for each hex as a pin. Do you recommendations on how best to do this? Okay, so SW, do you mean putting this information into Anvil? World Anvil is not associated with us, so I can't answer that question when it comes to World Anvil. But if you mean how to put that information in Inkarnate, then yes, I can help you with that. So let me define what you mean by helping you. Sorry about that. Can't really explain. That's okay, Joy. That's quite all right. If you're on our Discord, feel free to ask that question. You can DM me or PM me, whichever your preference is, and we can maybe go over that. I am on Discord. Go check out our Discord server, by the way. There are a lot of people that can also help you with further scale questions. So with SW, do you mind defining or clarifying what you mean? Do you mean switching over to World Anvil? I can't help you there. But if you, again, are talking about putting the DM information in Inkarnate, I can totally show you how to do that. It's not related to a scale, necessarily to this particular thing, because we're focusing on scale, but I can go over just briefly how I go about adding that in. We're at 10:52. I kind of want to wrap this up within the next, probably within the next half hour or so. So I'll wait for SW to kind of verify what they're talking about. Again, please don't ask questions about World Anvil because I actually don't know. I don't use World Anvil. And as a little teaser, we might be expanding our tool to go beyond just map making. Okay, sorry. The text limit is killing me. Yes, if you can do this in Inkarnate, that's what I'm looking for to avoid World Anvil and do it on the tool. Would love that. So, okay, so currently there are two ways to go about that. There is the note tool. Okay, so you have this note tool and you just place it where you want, let's say over this grid right here, and then you have a series of notes, just say note, and then add in your lore or whatever. So that's that first step, and you'll notice that the note is there. It disappears when you don't have the note tool selected. So the only way you can see your notes is by clicking the note tool, and you'll see your list of notes here. Click edit, go in, add in all your information. Now I do want you to know that yes, absolutely, we are going to be extending the note tool into a more of a campaign suite. So right now the note tool is kind of bare bones, and we will be adding more. So I'm really excited to get that note tool really polished, buffed, and to be more specific for DMs to have more information stored for their campaigns. So right now, slightly limited. There are other things that you can do besides notes. Often I'll put information in text right next to a hex. It depends how much information that is. If you're putting a lot of information per hex, a lot of lore, geographical information, encounters, all that information, I would put that in the notes, and I would not put that put that information on the map itself. I would put that in the notes. And just so you know, notes are only visible for right now inside the map. So there are no notes outside of maps, but don't worry, that is on our to-do list. We will absolutely try to turn Inkarnate into more than just a map tool, but a full campaign suite. But that takes time. We have limited amount of developers. We've already got a whole bunch on our list. So just kind of keep your eyes out, keep your eyes peeled for more changes. And trust me, we're adding a lot. So for right now, I hope SW that briefly kind of helped you with where to put your DM information notes. Okay, let's go ahead and move along with no other questions. Let me check. No other questions that I know of so far. I'll move into Battlemaps, and if there are further questions, we'll go back and address them. I'll try to keep a sharper eye on the chat. Okay, so exciting stuff. Thanks for sharing. Oh, of course. When the note tool is expanded on, will there be a way for multiple DMs to collaborate without account sharing? I don't know, but that's a great thing. I like that idea. And I would check our Discord for feature requests. Check and see if that request is there. I'm not sure what to type in search to see if it's there or not, but I would double check. If you don't find it, then go ahead and add it as a request, because I do think that having I think it's called a kind of a sharing option where two people can work on something at the same time would be a really great feature. It's difficult to implement, but it would be a really great feature. That's exciting to hear. Absolutely, Moo. This is so sweet news. I'll be looking forward to that. I know, me too. I'm excited. I'm very excited, but we're not sure about its features or when it will be ready. Yes, absolutely. We don't know. We just know that we would like to expand on it. We haven't fully flushed that out. Our developers are working on a lot of other features right now, some exciting stuff, and more art, of course, from the artists. So I can't give you too much information. Just what I know is that we do have plans. We are hatching evil plans. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it would be very helpful. I agree. I'm going to go ahead and save these changes, and we'll move on to the battle map section. I don't want to go too far off topic because I'm really pushing hard to condense these streams into shorter time increments, because I don't want people to get lost in the sauce and have to go through about 20 minutes of whatever to find what they're looking for. Yes, I'm excited too, and don't worry, we will keep you. We will, as soon as we have some information to share, of course, we always share what we have when we do have it. So we don't keep anything from you, sort of. Okay, so let's go into battle maps. If there's any other questions, maybe we can address it after the stream. So for here, I am changing the grid settings. You'll notice that the ground is kind of bright, and I don't feel like you need to use white as a grid setting, so you can just drop that opacity down quite a bit and make sure that the grids are at least visible. You don't want the opacity so far down that you can't see them, and you don't want them so standing out to where it kind of takes away from the scenery of your battle map, right? So when you apply your grid, drop the opacity a bit, change the color of the grid to whatever color matches the overall color palette of your map. Okay, so just kind of factor that in. Do you recommend certain stamp sizes to keep things consistent? So with battle maps, the same concept in world maps, the first stamp that you place down, which is mountains, is the guide that you'll use. Okay, so if I put down a barrel or I put down a chair, that's the first thing I put down, then everything else should probably be scaled to that. Okay, so let me just make an example. So we have this battle map here, and we have this nice kind of land formation, kind of a mound, right? And you want players to climb up it. So let's first set the grid. Let's just say that this is 5 by 5 feet. This is 5 feet. So I'm just going to go ahead and put 5 feet. Again, going with the imperial and not the metric. So let's just say, and this is pretty standard, 5 feet squares is pretty standard. I'm sure other people might go with other things, but from what I understand, the standard is 5 feet or 5 square feet. Okay, and it's really interesting. You can find some things online that kind of give you a reference that show a human being inside of a 5 square feet. So if this is the guide, if this square is 5 by 5 feet, then let's go into the catalog and let's add in something. Let's say a barrel, a crate, any of those things. So let's go to Fantasy Battlemaps, and I'm just going to go ahead and immediately put in a crate. So let's put a crate down, and we're going to see. So obviously, some crates can be 5 by 5 feet, massive crates. But let's just say that you wanted a standard crate that a person can kind of pick up. It's probably going to be about a quarter size of this, so about 4 of these combined. So these are about 2.5 feet. That's how big they are. 2.5 feet is still a fairly large crate, but this is that first stamp, right? And that first stamp that you paint, that you put down, is going to be your reference for the rest of the stamps, okay? So if I put down, let's say I put a crate up here and I put it right here, I'm not going to worry about shadows or anything, but if I put a crate here and now I want to put some other things up here to, let's say I want to put a staircase or something. I want to put a staircase, goes right here. Then we're going to go into that catalog, type in stairs, okay? And other things, that there are a lot of ways to go about scaling with Battlemaps, by the way. It doesn't have to be the first stamp. You can go ahead and put a corpse down. Let's say that you want to put a skeleton down or a corpse. Let's say that you want a little bit something, oopsie, corpse is not a real thing, so let's not do that. So let's say that we have a corpse, right? Okay, and if you have a corpse, then you have a good idea of how big a person is. So let's say we scale it up. This person's going to be about 5+ feet. They could be about 6 feet tall. Just depends if this is 5 by 5 feet, because you've got an extra 1.5 feet here. Let's maybe bring it down a little bit more. This person is probably going to be roughly about 6.1, I think, 6.1 or 6.1 feet tall. Okay, and we're just going to put a body somewhere. Let's just put it here, and then we have this as another reference. Okay, so if you feel like a crate is not anthropomorphic enough for you to use as a reference for how big your character is on the thing, just place a good old corpse right there on the ground and say, and you don't have to keep it there. I'm just going to keep it there so that you know what I'm talking about. So from there, you want to say, okay, how do I scale properly my stairs here? So these stairs are about 5 feet wide, so you can fit about 2 people going up and down these stairs, and you can change it as you see fit. So let's just say I want to put this staircase right here. It's just so that people can walk up to get to this point, okay? So that's generally how I go about scale with it. Is 1, set your grid size. That means just how big your grid's going to be. That's not setting the scale like 5 feet, 10 feet. That's just setting the grid. So you put the grid down first. Okay, so this grid looks good. Then you say, okay, now I'm going to set 5 feet to each grid, and then from there you can decide how many feet or how wide your thing is. So if this is 5 feet and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, this is 50 feet across. Okay, 50 feet across. That's quite a bit. That's a lot of room for your player to run around and do stuff. Okay, 50 feet, and I don't know what this is. This is probably going to be, if this is 10 feet, if this is 50 feet, then this is probably going to be closer to about 100+ feet going down on the lengthwise. Okay, so it's about 50 feet. Okay, so 5 feet is the generic, unless someone else knows about it. And then you can start scaling down. Now let's say you want to add something bigger. We've done little things, like we have a crate here that's fairly small. This person is relatively tiny. This crate is rather large. We have this here. Let's try adding in like a tree, okay? How would you go about adding in some natural stuff? So let's put in a tree, okay? Let's go with what the size of this is. This is about 36, this is 36, and this is 36. So these are all relatively within the same scale. I don't recommend going too far above or below. So if you set it, your stamp sizes at 36, make most of your stamps around 36. There are exceptions to that rule. I wouldn't do anything unnatural to go above that scale. I would try to stay within 36 or whatever that number is. When it comes to, like, let's say trees and bushes and grass, natural elements, I think it's a little bit more okay to stretch that limit, because sometimes you want a really big tree and you don't have a really big tree in the catalog, okay? So let's just put down a basic, let's just go scroll through our sizes. So I'm looking at these trees, and these are all really small. Like the largest one in this category just seems only about 5-something feet wide, if not 6 feet. So it's okay to go in and scale up if you want to have a larger tree maybe growing right here, okay? So it's okay to scale up more natural stamps, rocks, trees, plants, stuff like that. Let's maybe put in a rock. I'll go ahead and type in rock so you can kind of see it. And there should be some large rocks here. Let's take them down to 36 so you can kind of see what they look like. So it's really, this rock is relatively small, but you can make it bigger. Let's say you want to scale it up and you want to put it in the corner right here, like this. It's just a rock here in the corner. Let's say that you want it to match in with the background, then just select it and just go with luminosity and then change the brightness of it so you want it to match in better. So let's say that you have your stone there, and let's say that you want to add in more stones to it. So we go to rock. There's some smaller rocks here, and this is the part where you can just kind of not worry too much about scale. Obviously, if you want your players to run around, to jump on top of the rock, use it as a height advantage for increasing your arrow range, a spell range, or whatever you want to use height to your advantage, then yeah, make the rock a little bit bigger because you want your player to walk on it. Because look at this. If I put this up on top, you'll see that there's not much walking room on top of this rock. If you want a lot of walking room on top of that rock, then just make it bigger, right? Go ahead and choose another rock that's going to be a heck of a lot larger, like this, so that you can fit more players on it and it's a little bit bigger. Let's just take a look how big this would be. I'm going to go ahead and go down where I have some room, some space to see the grid. This rock is fairly large. It looks like it's almost about 15 feet across and about just shy of 20 feet or maybe more in length, okay? So use that grid just like we use the scale. Just like we use the scale to do the difference between two different things, use that 5-foot square grid to decide how things are going to be. So turn on your grid right away when you're going to make a battle map. That would be my suggestion. Turn on your grid, immediately establish scale. And that way it'll be easier, because what happens if you make the battle map first and then you're like, okay, I want to make 5-foot square. And then all of a sudden you realize that it's like, oh my God, this staircase is about the size of a house. This rock, this crate is the size of a small bowl. This tree is only the size of a fingernail. Okay, so keep in mind when you're going about your battle maps is immediately put down your 5-foot grid so that way you know how to scale things properly, to know what distances you have to work with. So if your players are running away from like a mimic and they need to get to a safe spot up here, they know that they're going to have to run, gallop, jump, swim 50 feet, 20 feet or whatever to another zone on the battle map that might give you some advantage in the battle. So again, just to recap, put down your grid first, establish scale, which is 5 feet. That's pretty standard. And then you can start putting together your map. I put down the landscape first, these hills, because I'm not worried about it. But when it comes to more recognizable stamps that the human eye is familiar with, like staircases, man-made items, that's where you really want to start focusing on scale. Like you don't want your staircase to be so big that, that you can put 50 people on it. That's crazy, okay? So always use your grid to kind of help to verify how big your stamps are going to be. I generally do that just right away, so that way I know. I'm going to go check chat real quick. I'm terrible at guessing how big things are IRL. That's okay, Moo. I totally understand. If you just focus on using that 5-foot grid and try to scale it the best that you can, okay? Like, it's all right. So one thing I've noticed with players is that some players might be really picky and they're going to freaking get really mad at the DM and be like, ha, 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 look at this thing. It's 5. Okay. That it's personal preference. It depends on what your players, how picky they are. You as a DM, I would only focus on scale up to a certain point and just ignore any type of player that tries to harass you about, that you made your create, you know, an extra foot long or whatever. Okay, so that's just all a matter of personal preference. Don't worry about that. Okay. Is there any other questions so far about Battlemaps scale? I'm sure there's a lot more questions. Maybe there's a particular stamp that you struggle with when you place it and you have a hard time scaling it. Let me know what that might be. Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and read here. Same goes for mountains and volcanoes because nature comes in all shapes and sizes. Absolutely. Some mountains are massive, sometimes some are smaller. It really depends on how the mountain was formed, whether with plate tectonics and conduction, with, you know, the plates smashing up against each other, pushing the mountain range up, whether it was created through lava formations. It all depends. There is incredible diversity in nature, and that's why whenever I mention maps, I always talk about what I call the monotony of size issue. You don't want all your, this is kind of off topic, but you don't want all your, well, actually, no, this is scale. Let's go over that. I mention this in maps all the freaking time. And it's something that I call monotony of the monotony of size issue. And what I see some people do, and it's not everybody, but what I see is they'll place down, like, let's say a grass stamp or a fern or something like this, and they'll all make them about the same size. You'll notice it's all about, we're all about the same size, okay? And the issue that you hear is that just like what King Clown, oh, we'll mention legends. The legend, oh, no, it wasn't asking how to make legends. It was calling me a legend. I'm not a legend, but I'm just a mapping dude. Okay, that's me. I'm just a mapping dude. So, as King Clown had mentioned in the chat, because nature comes in all shapes and sizes, absolutely. That's so important. So this is a scale-related issue. Whenever I'm adding in flora, then what and rocks and things like that is I try to not use the same scale. So these are set to 70, and they're quite big. These are huge. I realize these are massive. If you want, I can just select these and scale them down to something a little bit smaller if you want. Ferns can be relatively big if you've seen a fern before. I'm going to select all on the set and just bring it down to 36. Where the scale is, it's a little small, so we can go boost it up a little bit bigger. Okay, so now that you've picked one large size, so what I like to do is go from large, medium, small. That is how I create a more unique and how to make the scale that nature, the diversity that nature has. So this is a large size fern, and what I'll go down is say, well, here's 25, 55, let's try 30. Okay, so here's one at 30, and I'll add just a couple here. And then let's say I want to add more. Let's drop it down to 15. Okay, and then I'll add a whole bunch of little ones like this. And what this does is it kind of creates this nice, smooth diversity that you would expect, at least in this stamp. Obviously, you would add a lot more different vegetation. That's up to you personally. If you want, you can go with a whole bunch of vegetation and then go through that large, medium, small scale. And that's how I deal with that. And I'm also going to change the shadow so it's a little easier to see. Let's go with select all from this set, switch over to none, or go over to layer. No, let's just go over to object. Actually, sorry. And I'll go ahead and just change these because they look weird and I want to have you something pretty to look at. Okay, there we go. I'll just move offset a little bit there. There we go. Now you can kind of see it better. So going through and kind of making a variety of sizes of a flora stamp that includes trees, rocks. Rocks isn't flora, but it's a geographic formation. Trees are geology, or not trees, but rocks. So, but having various rock sizes. So a large rocks go through what's called erosion by rain, snow, water. Those are all really the same thing. They're all water, wind, sand. All these things cause erosion. And so what I like to do often is to keep things in a relatively good scale is do that same thing. Large rock, medium-sized rock, small rocks, because that shows erosion, right? And that also pertains to scale, okay? So always keeping those things in mind always kind of helps. I'm going to go ahead and read real quick. Okay, so are there any plans to address the monotony of size issue? Already the system can be set to automatically choose a different angle or stamp from a set, so why can't it handle size automatically? That's a great question. Great question, Ogre in the Burbs. That's a great question, and I think you should maybe put that in into the feature request on Discord. Because, and I agree with you. I think that's a good idea because that would cut time down, right? Like when you're dealing with that monotony of size issue, you have to put down the larger ones, put the smaller ones, put the medium sized ones. Yeah, it's more time consuming. So maybe including size variation, maybe we can add something with a density brush. So you'll notice there's a density brush up here. Maybe we can consider varying sizes into the density brush so you have both big, medium, and small sizes. So that's a great idea, and you should include that in our feature request on Discord. Great idea, love it. I think that would help me too with my process. Jeremy, hey Jeremy, go small, the large that away your larger ones over the top, the smaller one. Yeah, absolutely. So, and maybe I misunderstood this, but if you're gonna go with large, as you would expect, you wouldn't expect the smaller one to be on top. You would expect the larger one to be on top, right? Because it's bigger, it's taller. So with all of your larger ones, just make sure they're set to a layer above, and that's all. So set layer 2. Medium size, set that to layer 1. Small size, set to layer 0. So there is an order of operation in the layers in which you want to show that size issue. So large ones, put a layer above. Medium, layer below that. Smaller ones, a layer below that. I hope I understood that properly, Jeremy. I'm sure you did notice that I had this larger one a layer below, and that just doesn't make any sense unless it's a new head or something like that. You've got some purpose for it, but if you don't, definitely drop the layer down. Okay, that's that. And again, see the smaller ones, drop them a layer down as well. So you would go layer 0, so it goes below this stamp, even though that's a layer up. My bad. 1, there we go. So that's what I would recommend, Jeremy. I hope I translated your comment properly. Great comment, and thank you for calling me out on that. I appreciate that. That is great. So just remember that your larger, taller stamps are going to be obviously a layer above anything that's shorter than it. Just like this crate is smaller than a tree. I've never seen a crate being bigger than a tree other than a sapling, so that it's beneath. So I hope I explained right. Yeah, that's exactly what that's what I was saying. Perfect. I'm so glad that I have Jeremy here to save my ass. So that is some things that I recommend when it comes to scale. With that, let me check. I just copied and posted my question into the Discord. Perfect. Yeah. If you want to have some dialogue with people in general, if it's a question, I'd relegate it to general. If you're going to make it a request, obviously put it in feature request. Don't ask the question in feature request because feature request has a very specific format, and that just makes it easier for moderators to go through them and go through it. If you go outside of the format, it's more difficult. So stick with the format in that channel, okay? Is there a way to select stamp by their size? There isn't, but I absolutely, well, wait a minute. There might be. Let me check just to verify that, just to make sure that I understand that properly. No, it doesn't look like it. I'm just checking the advanced settings just to verify, and I don't currently see it. No, not on inkarnate.com. Oh, oopsie, I'm on the wrong one actually. I'm on next.com. My mistake. Let me save this real quick and then refresh. I'm actually on a wrong link. My bad. I'll fix that. Is there a way to select stamp by size? I don't think so, but let me just verify that real quick before I talk out of my bum. That would be a great idea, by the way. I don't know, so let me just check that. Jeremy, so you can't search by size, but what I do is every time I step down, I grab all my old stamps and make a group and rename them. Yeah, you could do that. Let's say that you wanted, I'll give you an example. Let me just save real quick. It's gonna go in a little slow here. I'm just gonna take off the sweatshirt. It's getting a little warm in here. Ooh, wow, it's taking a little while to save. My goodness. I hope I didn't screw it up. Oopsie. Okay, so I just want to give you also a little heads up. If you're having some difficulty with your screen, you can also press your Command F12 key or right click and click inspect, and it will take you to a little console thing in the tab. It's basically a developer's window where you can inspect to see if there's any errors. And I'll try to set that up in a second to show it to you what I mean. It looks like it was just going slow. Let me go ahead and change this link. You can't see it, so give me 1 second to fix this real quick, and then we'll address that question. Where are we at? 11:19. About 15 more minutes or so. We'll see if we can cut it down to an hour and a half. Let me just quickly load the map real quick, and we'll move on to the next thing. Just 1 moment, please. Yeah, the group idea is great, Jeremy. Absolutely. If you want to just select, you know, specific things by size, and I would just group them that way. Excuse me. Absolutely. So just to emphasize what Jeremy is talking about. So if I just wanted to select all these larger ones and then just group them, and Jeremy, correct me if I got it wrong. So you have these larger ones, group, and you just put large ferns, right? And then you're going to turn around and make sure that's set to a higher layer. So this is set at layer 1. Let's go up to layer, this whole thing. Now all these stamps will be on the same layer. So you can go up a layer, and then you can select all the medium-sized ones. Like these are the oopsie, I don't want to do that. Let's select these. Oopsie, I think I accidentally selected that one. Oopsie, let's delete that. Let's just say that we have, these are the medium-sized ones. Group, rename it, and call them medium ferns, and then so on. You would go on to the next one. I got a problem saving sometimes when it takes too long, so I just cancel and save again. Usually fixes. Okay, just want to make sure. Okay, so just so you know, you can go, I think there's a shortcut key. I think it's Command F12 or something like that. Let me try to find the right shortcut key. It's going to take you to the developer window. Maybe it's Function F12. Let me just verify real quick. Okay, so as you can, I don't know if you can see this or not. Let me just check to make sure that it's in the thing. It doesn't look like it. But if you can go and you can't unfortunately see this, but if you right click, press inspect, if you look to the right side, a panel will come out. Click the tab called console, and you'll see lines of code. And what you'll see is a bunch of red text, and that will let you know that there is an error with your map. Now, if that happens, make sure that you just go click our support tab, and we'll help you out, okay? So questions like problem with saving and stuff, save that for our customer support. We'll be more than glad to help you out. Myself or Philip, we kind of manage that. Let me see what are the questions we have here. I think this is a stage test server, guys. Try to find any clues for future features. Nice one, White. Okay. Well, I'm gonna save. I'm gonna just save this. I'm gonna fix this real quick. I don't know if users really need to see this map or not, so I just wanted to have this along. Why don't we? I'm going to go ahead and fix some changes on the map, and then people can add some final questions that they have about either one of those scale things. I hope I covered a majority of it. I'm sure there's a lot more to cover. But again, like I said, I'm just trying to make these a little bit shorter for you guys. So you're not like, oh my God, get to the part that I care about instead of talking to me. Okay, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and just quickly fix this and then save it. And people can go ahead and ask questions. And I'm more than glad to answer any questions that you might have. Go ahead and save. What? That's weird. Okay, so that's saved. No questions so far in the chat. I know there's a delay, so I will wait. I will wait. I got about 7 minutes, and we'll answer those. We'll answer questions within that time frame. I'll call it good. And just a reminder, I will be trying to cut out clips from these videos so that you can just straight up go immediately to these small clips, because some people just don't want to watch live streams and then have to go through each increment. They prefer to just have that information right there. So I'll be doing that. And then also we might be introducing time lapses. We have a great rich EA community and a bunch of power users, and hopefully I'm going to get them to try to record their map process, condense them into time lapses, and then add them onto the channel, because some people just want to watch a time lapse, some people want to watch a live stream, some people want to watch a really quick 5-minute guide. Everyone has different tastes, so I'm going to try to cater to everyone's needs. There's going to be live streams. There's going to be all the different content, okay? Talk to me all day. You could stream for 8 and I'd love it, but I know you need to eat too. Yeah, food is usually pretty good. You know, no, I could, no, I need food. Food is delicious. Yeah, feel free to, hey, Brian. Yeah, Brian's here. Thank you, Jeremy. I never thought of select all of one kind then group. I'm just silly though. No, you're not silly. That's not silly. I do actually recommend, just in general, Jeremy makes a good point in general, that grouping is just fantastic, because grouping puts everything, all the stamps in that group will be on one layer instead of 5 stamps being on different layers, right? So that's actually really, really helpful. And as you know, groups are labeled on the right panel. You can see what layer it's on, and there's also a layer tab right here. So with all the objects, it tells you all the different layers. There's that foreground and background, which you can hide the BG and hide the FG layers, so you can do those things. You can also hide any stamps that are on certain layers, like you don't want any stamps to show on layer 5. Boom, they're gone, right? You don't want any stamps to show on layer 2. Boom, those stamps are gone. So check out the layers tab, objects, and then you can change the visibility of each one of these layers, okay? So that's really, really important. I don't use this too often, but I'm sure other people do. Okay, any other questions? Let's just verify. No other questions that I can see so far. We're just gonna wait just a little bit longer. We'll wait 5 minutes, and then I am gonna take off. I've really enjoyed explaining scale. I was actually super nervous. I didn't know if I had enough brain power, you know, crammed in my cranium to try to explain this properly. Oh, I want time lapse, Jeremy, and your maps are beautiful. Chef's kiss maps for Jeremy. So I definitely want you to do some time lapse of your work. And for those of you who don't know too, we just added a couple new channels on our Discord. We added a GM channel for those of you GMs and DMs that want to communicate with each other on ideas and talk about your campaigns. And we also included another channel called Guides, or I think it's Guides and Tutorials. And it's not just my stuff. I'm not a greedy little grub. I'm putting down every tutorial and guide that I've made, and as well as some other people. I think Hustle has some good ones. Jeremy, I know you don't have any visual guides, you only have videos, so maybe we can link up sometime today, and you can share some links with me on some tutorials or time lapses that you have that we want to put in that channel, because the guides in that channel, the guides in the channel are vetted by myself or other team members. So we just want to make sure that the guides that we have in that channel are of a good quality. So forgive us if we're picky in that way. And oh no, King, you didn't know that you could change the layers? Oh, now that you know, I'm sure it'll be extremely useful, right? So yeah, any other questions in the chat? No, so I did fine. Thank you, Joy. I appreciate it. Yeah, once in a while, being a map lord, you sometimes get a little edgy, and you lose confidence in yourself, especially with this whole COVID thing going on. A lot of people are kind of losing it, going mental. So I know I'm going mental. So, but yeah, we're trying to keep it together, right? Oh, with large scale stuff, when you need to figure out how big something is compared to something else, do you need a quick and dirty method? Do you have a quick dirty method for large scale stuff when you need to figure out how big something is compared to something else? You mean like a mountain? Is that what you mean, Moo? Yeah, let me know what it is. I'm assuming you mean a mountain. Do you mean specifically like, and also let me know what kind of map, because it depends. Do you mean a battle map, a regional, a world? Let me clarify a little bit more about what you mean. Don't have to look up a million things. I don't think I understand. I'm sorry. I guess I'm confused. Do you mean a battle map and then putting a mountain on it? I wouldn't even put a mountain in a battle map, frankly. I mean, you'd only see a section of a battle map of a mountain on a battle map, because a mountain's huge, absolutely massive. Yeah, mountains, lakes. Okay, yeah. Okay, so, and you mean specifically battle maps, right? And if you do mean battle maps, then you wouldn't show the whole mountain, obviously. that would take up a huge battle map, right? You just showed like maybe the foothills and maybe some of the bottom part of the mountain. Oh, in a regional? Okay. Well, I mean, okay, so if you're doing a regional map, the reality is that let's say that I'm going to put a mountain down. Let me just get this real quick. I always struggle with this one. I mean, do you mean like a hex map? Are you using a grid? What kind of what are you using, Moo? Let me know. We can maybe go over this real quick. Let's go fantasy regional mountains. I could talk with you all day, but I do have to eat. I do have to eat. Okay, so let's say that you have a regional map, and I think I mentioned this in the beginning of the stream, but you're more than likely with your mountains. Mountains are massive in comparison to anything else. And of course, if you wanted to scale the mountain to be massive, to be scaled to trees and everything, your mountain would probably take up the entire screen. That is how huge mountains are. So instead of trying to worry about whether or not the mountain is massively scaled properly, I would just go with a representation instead. I would say that, yes, this mountain is really small, but any bit bigger, it's going to take up massive swaths of your map, right? So, and I would just avoid that personally. I wouldn't want to deal with having this massive mountain and then your players have to find a way to get around it and stuff. And this is personal, this is just personal preference and experience. I've tried making a regional map where the mountains are scaled pretty large. There are some things you can do. There's something called a transform tool. And as you can see here, here's a mountain and you want it to look a little bit bigger. You can scale it up like this, just so you know that transforming does come with a lot of weird things if you transform a lot. Let me add a different mountain that has less peaks on it. So if you click this, you go to advanced settings, go to transform, go to height. One thing you can do to make your mountains a little bit bigger is just to stretch them a little bit to give them a sense of more overwhelmingness, overpowering, being larger. So the transform tool can kind of help with that, because if you were to scale it up, let's just try to scale this mountain to a tree. And even then, this is tiny. This is a really tiny mountain against that tree. And you can see that this isn't going to work, right? It also gives you large line work. It looks weird. It doesn't work right. So instead, go with try transforming it a little bit, making it a little bit higher to give it that sense of overwhelmness, omnipotence, largeness, scale. You know what I mean? That's one way to go about it. Let me just quick and see what people said here. Jeremy says, I would use a tree or a house in a world of regional and a bed and battle map. Great suggestions. I totally agree with that. Either hex grid, etc. No worries. This is just a whole new topic. I missed the beginning. This is actually what I said in the beginning, but I don't mind repeating myself. Again, just try not to worry about making a mountain perfectly to scale, because your mountains perfectly to scale or close to scale with your trees is going to be insane. I wouldn't even bother with it. I would just scale up the mountain large enough to where it has the sense of being imposing, and maybe use the transform tool to increase the height, because increasing that height will make it look like it is a mountain towering over the trees. That'd be my suggestion. And what a shame not making maps for 2 years already, but still have Constitution going for better times. I'm sorry to hear that. Q, scale on the coastline of a world map. How do you recommend to handle the forever discussion of coastlines being too much straight or too much on the opposite direction? Okay, so okay, I'm just going to answer this question. This is going to be the last question, okay? Because I will last longer. So the way that I go about this, and you're talking about specifically like scale of a coastline. This is somewhat related. So let me just do a real quick guide on how I go about doing that. So whenever I decide to make a landmass, I generally use the edgy brush, and you can turn the smooth on or off. It's up to you. You can change the dimensions of the feature size to whatever you want. If you don't want the edges to be super big, then you can change that. Let's just switch things around. Let me change remove the smooth and bring it down to the smallest thing. So this is what it looks like with a much smaller. So the way that I do in land masses is I make a very large shape first, okay? And then you go in, and this is the reverse. Sorry, I made this section, I made this the BG and this the FG. But so think of this as the reverse. You make something with the add mode of the mask tool, and then you go in with multiple passes. The way I describe it is like a sculptor, right? When you're sculpting a large rock, a piece of stone, you first carve out the main shape, right? The main shape that you want. So let's say that you want the main shape to be like this weird shape like this. Okay, let's say that you have this shape. Okay, then the next step that you go in is to bring the size of your brush down, and then go in and make even smaller changes. And what you're doing is just multiple passes. Okay, this is not a very good example because there's a huge line width here and all this stuff, but that's how I start. It's like a Pangea thing. Think of it as really large landmass, and then just slowly shave, or not slowly, quickly shave away the horns. Like a horn is like this thing right here. This would be like a horn right here. An isthmus. Carve out a bay or an inlet or a sea. That is how I go about it. Go large first, and then go through and slowly shave off to create the more intricate formations that you want on your shorelines. Like I said, horns, stuff like that. I hope that answered the question. If it didn't, then I apologize, and maybe I should go into another video that kind of explains that. Could you make the tree slowly get smaller as it gets closer to the mountains to get the scale to? Yeah, you absolutely could do that, but I mean, that might look weird, right? Because you'll have larger trees scaling down into another one. Honestly, I think what would be really nice is if we could create like a forest tool that lets you create those like forests that aren't a collection of individual trees, but looks like a blanket, okay? That's something that we might want to look into and try to figure out. But yeah, you could totally do that if you wanted to, Queen Zamara. That's totally up to you. I am going to take no further questions at this time. I'm going to go ahead and call it good. I hope this helped. If it didn't help, go ahead and say how much I suck in the comments, and I promise I will read them and not poo-poo you. But yeah, I hope that this scale guide was helpful. I'm going to go ahead and take my lunch. Everyone has been extremely kind. All your questions have been poignant, and it's really challenged me to try to find out the right answers for you. So I appreciate that. If you have any other comments too, like future videos or things that you want to see, please put that in the comments below. You guys have been awesome. Thank you so much for joining me in this stream, and I look forward to the next one, and that one is going to be how to create underwater scenes using all this, I think fantasy regional. I'm not sure what style. That's going to be on Discord, so go join the Discord. If you don't want to be a member of the Discord, you still want to see that stream, every stream I do on Monday on Discord gets recorded and puts on the YouTube channel on Thursday of that same week, so that you're not missing anything. Okay, hey, thank you so much, everybody. You've been great. Again, questions have been poignant. You've challenged my silly nuts, and I enjoy that. So thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate it. Bye, everybody. And Savina, sorry I didn't get to your question. We'll get to that in the future. Don't worry. Goodbye, everybody. Stream perfect. Dismiss.